The most important decision that you make, I believe, is what you decide to do about Jesus. Do you believe that he is who he claims to be or not? I think this is of monumental importance because I think it's of eternal importance. And I think that eternity changes everything. I think eternity is the thumb on the scale that means if we're going to live forever, we need to live today in light of the fact that we're going to live forever. And I believe that what Jesus claims and what the New Testament teaches is that we have a moral debt that we have to figure out what to do with, and we cannot work it off. I don't want to be accountable for it. And so the atoning, sacrificial, substitutionary death of Jesus Christ is something that I am very thrilled to embrace. So all of that pivots around Jesus' claim to be that sacrifice. Jesus' claim to be the atonement for our sin. And so we have to step back and look, who is Jesus? What does he claim? Why would we believe that his claims have any merit? So that's what we're looking at today. And I wrote a book, 10 years ago or so, called The Life of Jesus Christ. And I opened it by noting 7 things about Jesus. And I want to give you these 7, and then we're going to focus on number 1. So I said, look, Jesus is the most influential person who has ever lived. There have been, by some estimates, 80 billion, with a B, 80 billion people who have walked on this rock, and Jesus is by far the most influential. I would go on to say he's the greatest teacher who ever lived. Note that he claimed to be God. I encourage people to look at him because I think you probably know less about him than you might think. There are good reasons to believe that he is God. Whoever he is, he cannot simply be a good man. We looked at that yesterday with C.S. Lewis's trilemma argument. And then I've said the stakes are really high. These are the reasons why you ought to take another look at Jesus. So today I want to think about this idea that he's the most influential person who ever lived. We're living in a moment when people want to be influencers. It was my word of 2022, noting that it's like 80% of kids under the age of 14, when you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, they say they want to be an influencer. Okay, well, Jesus is an example of what real influence actually looks like. While most people's influence goes down after they die, Christ's influence has continued to grow every year. He is the world's most familiar figure. And he secured this impact in spite of the fact that he did none of the things that you would tell him to do if he actually wanted to be the most influential person who ever lived. He lives in a very small, he doesn't travel very far. He dies at the age of 34. He didn't write a book. He didn't build a building. He didn't run for office. He didn't tweet, post, or blog. He didn't have a podcast. He didn't have millions of followers. He didn't do almost any of the things that you would expect him to do if he was setting himself up to be remembered. And yet, 2,000 years later, he's at the center of just about everything. More books have been written about him. More music has been dedicated to him. More buildings have been created by him. More people have died for him. More people have studied his words. More people are right now studying his words and trying to figure out how they can become more like him. He inspired more charities, hospitals, orphanages, and schools than any other person. Once you start to pay attention to Jesus, you realize, wow, he is the most influential person who ever lived. I really ought to have a good understanding of who he was, what he taught, and what he claimed. We're going to keep looking at that. Have a good day.